They chained her like an animal and sold her for the price of a sack of nails. In broad daylight, in front of children, the town of Blood Hollow prided itself on being civilized. But on that frozen morning, a man in a tattered coat and two children by his side watched something savage unfold. A woman in shackles auctioned off like broken furniture. Her name was Lyra Quinn, though the crowd didn't care. To them, she was a debt, a burden, a thing to be cleared off the books. No one knew she carried the last surviving map to water buried beneath the desert, or that she was the daughter of a murdered genius whose invention could change the fate of the entire territory. But one man did step forward. Elias Granger didn't come to buy a person that day. He came for flour, salt, and medicine for his daughter's worsening cough. Yet when the bidding dropped to $1 and the silence screamed louder than the wind, he did what no one else dared. He bought her freedom with his last coin. What he didn't know was that this act of mercy would ignite a war, not just for land or gold, but for the very future of the West. Before we dive in, if this kind of story stirs something in you, comment one and subscribe to our channel. If not, at least hit like, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why silence is complicity. And trust me, the final twist will hit you like a freight train. And Elias Granger didn't know her name when he took her home. The wagon creaked beneath the weight of silence. The two children huddled in the back. Wren with cheeks flushed from fever, Boone gripping his father's old rifle too tight for a boy his age. And beside Elias sat the woman he had just bought for $1. Her wrists were raw where the iron had bitten, her eyes forward, unblinking, locked on the ridgeline like she was watching for ghosts. He offered her a blanket. She didn't take it. "I'm not cold," she said flatly. But she was. Her fingers were blue beneath the dirt. Her dress was torn, and blood stained the hem. Still, she refused the gesture because she wasn't ready to need anyone. Not again. They reached the ranch by dusk, a leaning cabin and a half-collapsed barn tucked into the frozen belly of Blackroot Valley. Elias had patched every board with his own hands, a place built from grief and calloused hope. He helped Wren down from the wagon first. The child coughed, sharp and dry. The woman watched, her face unreadable, until Elias finally turned to her. "You have a name?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. "Lyra." It dropped like a stone between them. No last name, no details. Just a name, brittle and sharp. She stepped off the wagon without his help and walked straight into the cabin, uninvited but not unwelcome. Boone narrowed his eyes as she passed. He was old enough to sense the weight she carried. Not just pain, but danger. Inside, the air was bitter, the fire low. Elias moved to stoke it, but Lyra had already knelt by the hearth. She tore strips from her sleeve and wrapped Wren's feet. She moved like someone who had done this before for siblings. Maybe. Or for prisoners. "You're good with children," Elias said. Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she said, "There were others. In the cells." He froze. "You mean in the jail?" "No," she said, meeting his eyes. "I mean the cages." For a moment, the wind howled outside like the mountains themselves had stopped breathing. There were girls Elias sold, traded, shipped in crates marked as lumber. One tried to chew through the lock. They broke her jaw for it. Her voice cracked, but she didn't blink. She couldn't cry after that, just whimpered like a dog. Elias felt his stomach churn. He'd seen hardship, starvation, illness, men left to die under open sky, but this was rot at the bones of the territory, and it wasn't bandits or drunken ranchers. This was organized, controlled, permitted. "Why you?" he asked. "Why only you made it to that platform?" Lyra stared into the fire. "They called me the map." "What kind of map?" "My father created a machine. It could locate underground aquifers, enough water to make this land bloom. He wanted to give it to settlers. But the men who run the mines, the railroads, they don't want bloom. They want control." She unhooked something from around her neck, a small silver locket with intricate gears etched into its frame. "They think it's inside here." "Is it?" Elias asked. She looked at Wren sleeping, sweating, skin pale as ashes. "I don't know." "Oh." That night, As Elias lay on the floor beside the fire with the rifle across his lap, sleep never came. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like boots. Every gust of wind became hooves in the dark. And Lyra? She sat by the window all night, watching the trees sway, fingers curled around the locket like a trigger. She wasn't afraid of being hunted. She was afraid of what would happen when they caught her. Down. The first sign that something was wrong came with the broken floorboard. Lyra had woken before dawn, the way survivors do light sleepers haunted by memory. While Elias chopped wood behind the cabin and the children still clung to sleep, she moved through the house with practiced quiet. But when her heel hit the third plank past the hearth, it dipped and gave a hollow sound. She paused, then knelt. Beneath the board was a space wrapped in burlap and secrecy. Inside, leather, bound journals, water-damaged but intact, pages marked with drawings of gears, terrain elevations, and hydrology notes so precise it made her knees go weak. She knew that handwriting, her father's précis, and she knew something else. Too, these pages should have been lost. They had vanished the same night he did. A cold wind blew through the room. But it wasn't the chill that made her tremble. Elias stepped in moments later, carrying a basket of kindling. His boots froze at the threshold. He saw the floorboard, the journals, her face. The look that passed between them was not confusion. It was recognition. "You knew," she whispered. Elias set the basket down, slow and deliberate. "It's not what it looks like. It looks like you kept my father's journals hidden under your floor for a decade." He didn't deny it. "I worked for him," he said quietly, "for 2 years, before he disappeared." Lyra's voice dropped to a low, hard scrape. "And when he vanished, you didn't say a damn word. You didn't tell the town. You didn't tell me." "I saw him taken," Elias replied. "Dragged out of the lab by Thornfield's men. I didn't stop them." "Why not?" He couldn't look at her when he said it. "Because I was afraid. Because they said, if I spoke, they'd come for my family next." Silence bled into the walls of the cabin. In the next room, Wren's soft coughing ticked like a clock, counting down to something irreversible. Lyra clenched the journals to her chest. "These were his last words," she said, her voice trembling. "His vision for this land, water for the people, not for men like Thornfield, and you buried them beneath your floor like shame." Elias flinched. "I was trying to protect my children." Lyra turned, eyes burning. "You don't protect children by hiding the truth. You protect them by fighting for a better world." Outside, a crow cried in the distance, a low, broken sound, like grief echoed. She stormed past Elias and out into the cold morning. Snow crunched beneath her boots. The journals still clutched in her arms, like something sacred. The mountains loomed ahead, unfeeling, monumental, and now full of memories she couldn't outrun. From the barn, Boone watched silently. He had heard enough. And he had questions that would split a boy in two. Was the man he called father a coward? Or a survivor? Back in the cabin, Elias sat beside the fire, face buried in his hands. The same hands that had once helped Alaric Quinn build machines of hope, and then helped bury his legacy in silence. But the cost of silence was now knocking. At the edge of town, Bartholomew Crank counted the coins from his latest transaction and told the saloon keeper what he'd heard. That the girl on the auction block wasn't just some runaway or lost soul. She was the map, and word spread. By nightfall, 6 riders had already left town, their saddlebags packed with ammunition and their orders clear. Bring back the girl, or bring back the locket, or bring back what's left of both. And Boone was the first to see the smoke. It rose in a thin line from the east ridge, barely visible against the iron sky. But it wasn't the smoke of a cabin fire or winter cookpot. This was darker, heavier, like something meant to flush prey from hiding. He didn't say a word, just slipped from the barn and walked inside with the quiet dread of a boy who had grown up too fast. Lyra was still by the fire, the journals open in front of her, lips moving silently as she studied the notes, her father's formula for locating water sources across the west. Elias sat on the other side of the room, his presence heavy, useless. He hadn't spoken much since the confrontation. Boone's voice broke the silence. "They're coming." Lyra looked up. "How many?" "Don't know. But the smoke's wrong." She didn't ask for further proof. Boone had his father's eyes wide, cautious, always scanning. When he said they were coming, they were. Lyra stood, closing the journal carefully, like it was a sacred text. Wake Ren, no saddlebags, only essentials, and the locket stays with me. Elias finally stirred. We can't just run. We don't even know who. Yes, we do, Lyra snapped. It's Thornfield. Or Kane. Or both. Doesn't matter which one sent them, they're all after the same thing. And if we stay, they'll burn this place to the ground. She strapped the journals tight in a satchel, then tucked the silver locket beneath her collarbone. The metal was warm from her skin, but it felt heavier than ever. Ren was barely awake when Boone helped her into her coat. Her small body leaned into his, hot with fever. She's burning, Boone said, alarm rising in his voice. Lyra reached out and touched the child's forehead. Too hot. Too fast. She needs medicine, she muttered. Real medicine. Not boiled herbs and prayers. The closest town's 20 miles, Elias said, and probably crawling with men who'd shoot a child just to watch me scream. Outside, a wind had picked up dry and bitter, laced with pine ash. It cut through the trees and rattled the shutters. Time was running out. Morality and caution were luxuries they could no longer afford. We ride now, Lyra said. They took the back trail through Deadroot Pass, where the snow reached up to the horses' knees and the trees bent low with frost. The mountains seemed to close in around them, pressing down with ancient weight. Ren moaned softly in Lyra's arms. The fever had turned her skin gray. Her breathing came in shallow pulls. Each exhale sounded like paper tearing. Don't you dare, Lyra whispered, voice fierce. Don't you dare give up on me. Boone rode ahead, rifle across his lap. Elias brought up the rear, watching their trail vanish behind them beneath fresh snowfall. At mile 10, Ren stopped shivering. Lyra's gut twisted. She's losing the fight. Elias looked forward to the tree line that marked the halfway point to the old mining town. We can make it. If we cut through Widow's Hollow, save 3 miles. Lyra's head snapped toward him. That trail's cursed. That trail's fast. And steep. And narrow. If the ice breaks, then it breaks, Elias said. But we don't get another shot. Silence fell. The kind of silence where someone's going to make a choice. They might not survive. Boone spoke first. I'll scout ahead. If it looks bad, we turn back. No, Lyra said. We go. Widow's Hollow was a graveyard carved into the mountain. Trees grew sideways. Rocks jutted like teeth, and beneath the snow, the trail was little more than a frozen ribbon over a ravine that could swallow them whole. But they made it. Barely. By the time they reached the far ridge, Ren was unconscious. Her lips pale. Her heartbeat fluttering like a wounded bird beneath her collar. And then they saw it, the town, or what was left of it. An abandoned mining camp, skeletons of buildings leaning against each other like drunks, empty windows blinking at the storm. It wasn't salvation, but it was shelter. They made for the largest building, a collapsed saloon, and huddled inside as the storm closed in. Elias laid Ren near the old hearth. Lyra built a fire from splintered chairs and shattered beams. Boone stood watch at the doorway, eyes scanning the darkness for movement. Lyra unwrapped the locket and opened it by firelight. Inside, the gears ticked faintly. A low, musical click echoed in the silence. I think it's reacting to temperature, she whispered. What does that mean? Elias asked. She looked up. I don't think this locket is the invention. I think it's the key. Outside, hoofbeats. Not a lot. Just 2. Close. Then a voice. Evening in there. We'd like a word with Miss Quinn. Lyra stood. The fire behind her threw shadows across the walls. Boone's hands tightened on the rifle. Elias moved toward the door. And Ren? She didn't stir. She barely breathed. The price of truth had come calling. And it came wearing a badge and a smile. Aller. The voice outside the ruined saloon wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It carried the kind of confidence that didn't require shouting. The kind men use when they're holding the gun and the clock. Inside, the fire cracked like bones in the silence. Lyra's eyes locked with Elias's. Boone moved first, shifting toward the corner of the doorway, rifle lifted just enough to speak without words. We're not running anymore. Then came the second voice. Female. Cool. Controlled. Too calm for a snowstorm. Don't be rash, Miss Quinn. We didn't come to harm the child. But you know how this works. The more you stall, the less we can guarantee. Civility. Lyra's hand instinctively pressed the locket closer to her chest. You know her? Elias asked. She nodded slowly. Her name's Isadora Vale. She's not a bounty hunter. She's worse. She negotiates for corporations who don't want their names spoken out loud. And the man? That'd be her iron. Elias moved beside the door. Then we keep them outside. But Vale didn't intend to stay outside. A moment later, boots crunched snow and the doorway filled with her figure, slick coat, fur-lined collar, dark gloves holding a pistol with care, like a wine glass. Her face was as unreadable as the mountains behind her. Beside her was a man in a dusted hat and long tan coat. No badge. No introduction. Just a presence like an avalanche in human skin. I told you we came to talk, Vale said. Voice light, eyes dangerous. But time is against us all, especially her. She nodded toward Ren, still unconscious by the hearth, wrapped in every blanket they had. You're tracking a fever, high grade. Likely strep or worse. Her lungs sound full. Lyra danced. You saw her? We saw her before we stepped off the horses. We've been following you for 2 days. Elias stepped forward. Then you know we're not handing her over. Vale smiled politely. Oh, Ilias, no one's asking for the girl. We're asking for the locket. And the rest of what's in that satchel? Number. The word came sharp, unflinching from Lyra's mouth. No negotiation? You represent Thornfield? Vale raised one eyebrow. I represent opportunity. Thornfield? He's yesterday's villain. He wants gold. Our interests are broader. You want water. Correction, I want control over access to water. There's a difference. Your father's invention isn't about streams and wells, Lyra. It's about power. Boone's voice, still young but steel-cut. Then you're not getting it. Vale smiled at the boy, truly smiled, for the first time. He's braver than most grown men I've met. The man beside her finally spoke. His voice was low and flat, like gravel sliding downhill. There's 6 more behind us, half a ridge out. You can run, but we'll have you by nightfall. And if we don't run, Elias asked, then we make you watch the girl die slow. Lyra's breath hitched. She looked down at Ren, barely breathing. The child's skin had turned waxy. No choices were left. Only costs. Take the journals, Elias said suddenly. Lyra turned on him. Number. We can't let her We can't let them own what my father died to protect. Maybe he died for nothing if a little girl dies with him. Silence thundered in the ruins. Then Boone's voice cut through it like a blade. What if they get both? Lyra looked up. I give them one journal, not the locket, not the coordinates. Vala tilted her head. 1. Enough to tease your investors. And in return, you ride out. You leave this child and this place alone. Tempting. You've got men, Lyra said, but I've got insurance. She unwrapped the locket in front of the firelight, twisting the tiny dial inside with delicate fingers. The gears clicked, then stopped. A faint red glow pulsed from its inner rim. Vale's eyes widened, so did her companions. Your father built that into jewelry? Lyra's smile was humorless. Failsafe. You try to open it by force. It burns the internal map. And you just activated it? I can deactivate it too. But only if you ride out now. Tension coiled tight. The air in the saloon felt electric. Vale hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the man beside her. He didn't blink, but his fingers tapped once on his revolver. A signal. They weren't leaving, so Lyra moved first. She threw the locket into the fire. Gasps followed. The man lunged forward, but Elias tackled him mid-step. The rifle cracked, once missed wood, splintered. Boone grabbed Ren. Lyra kicked the satchel across the floor, scattering the journals. Pick one, she yelled, and get out. Vale stared at the fire, horrified. Then finally she barked. Stand down. The man froze mid-motion. Elias rose slowly, bleeding from a cut above his eye. Vale walked to the satchel, chose one journal, and turned back toward Lyra. This won't stop the machine. I know, Lyra said, but maybe it'll buy time. And as Vale stepped into the snow, her voice drifted back over her shoulder. Next time we come, we won't be the first wave. Oh. She disappeared into the white, and Lyra finally collapsed beside Ren, clutching her close. They had survived the first storm. But the mountain wind whispered truth. The real siege had just begun. They didn't sleep that night. Not after the fire. Not after the rifle cracks and the screaming silence that followed when Vale and her man vanished into the storm with a single stolen journal and a threat that smelled like war. Elias sat by the crumbled wall, bleeding through his shirt. Boone tended to his father with the steadiness of a boy who no longer had time to be one. Wren slept finally, fever broken, chest rising softer, stronger. And Lyra watched the coals. She didn't move, didn't speak. The locket was still intact. She'd snatched it from the fire at the last possible moment, fingers blistered, eyes blind with rage. But it had worked. The bluff had held. For now, as the first light bled across the mountains, they rode west, toward the land her father had once mapped in secret valleys untouched by greed, where groundwater whispered beneath the soil, waiting. Lyra carried the remaining journals. Boone carried the rifle, and Elias carried the guilt not as burden, but as compass. 3 weeks passed. Then came the digging. Then came the water. Spring cracked through the frost line. Sappled from trees, birds returned. And the first pump lifted water from the earth like a resurrection. A dozen families, all drifters and wanderers and wounded souls, had joined them by then, word having spread without need for flyers or sermons. They built together, tilled soil together, ate with calloused hands, watched the valley bloom like it had been waiting for them all along. Lyra never spoke of the invention again. Not publicly, not in fear and principle. What her father had died to protect was no longer a weapon to be hoarded. It was a knowledge planted in trust. Each family was taught the system. Each household was taught the pressure values and gear alignments. No one owned it. No one could. The locket stayed in a drawer by Lyra's bedside. Not a trophy, not a secret, but a reminder. The future doesn't belong to the powerful. It belongs to those who refuse to sell it. And when Vale returned months later, quiet, alone, and without backup, it wasn't bullets that met her. It was the sound of children laughing by an irrigation ditch. It was the sound of rebellion that no ledger could touch. Endo. At its core, this story is not about gold, or land, or even water. It's about the price of silence and the courage it takes to finally break it. Elias Granger chose to protect his family by burying the truth. Lyra Quinn chose to expose it, even when it meant dragging her trauma into daylight. But it wasn't one choice that saved the valley, it was both. The repentance of one man and the defiance of one woman converged into something far greater than either could have built alone. The real inheritance wasn't the invention hidden in the locket. It was the understanding that knowledge means nothing unless it's shared, and freedom means nothing if it's only your own. In a world still driven by monopoly, by fear, by men with ledgers who see life as commodity, this story reminds us that there are other ways to build power. You don't need to rule land to protect it. You don't need to profit from water to honor it. Sometimes, the greatest act of rebellion is to teach others what was meant to be kept secret. And sometimes, the most dangerous people in a broken world are not those with guns, but those who plant seeds.